Thank you
Truly a
very much.
pleasure, and I hope we get a chance to speak again. Reach out and try to in the future, because you're just an excellent interviewer, and I feel like I'm just talking.
Hey, that's the greatest compliment I could hear. I have so many questions, so I'm just going to jump right into it.
Absolutely.
I really feel like one of the great things about Better Call Saul is that we really get to sort of fill in a lot of backstory that we didn't have before, especially when it comes to Gus Fring, his relationship with Mike, the first time that he met Saul, where the meth lab came from. But I'm curious, aside from like actual plot points, what is an aspect of who that man is that you haven't discovered as a result of doing this show?
Well, I think I've had the opportunity with Breaking Bad to have discovered so much of Gustavo Fring. This Better Call Saul is a very different show that certainly has allowed me to go backward in time. So what it has allowed me to find out is, Gus's nature before we knew him as the likable but yet very nefarious chicken man. What haven't I discovered? His family. Diving deep into his background is what I have not been able to sort of discover yet, because it hasn't been written. What I haven't discovered was his paternal side, which he displays to people in the world, but hasn't had the ability to show the world if he ever had a family. We had one scene back in Breaking Bad where I was cooking dinner and there were some photos of family on the wall. So a guy hiding in plain sight has a lot of secrets. And so there's still some discovery for me that I'd like to unearth in this final 6th season that we're moving into.
I feel like I would watch an entire series about the early days of Gustavo Fring. And I don't know if it's a situation where necessarily you could play that character, but would you be interested in down the road potentially handing off the character to someone else and letting them do the early days of where Gustavo came from to learn more about him? Or do you like the mystery? No? Okay.
No, I'm not handing anything over. I've always put bugs in Peter's ear and Vince's ear about the rise of Gus.
Yes.
The Rise of Gus would be a great story. I would love to play it. I would just have to get younger, which I can do. I'm an actor.
You look the exact same. from Better Call Saul to Breaking Bad. And if anything, if Martin Scorsese has taught us anything, is that we can always go in reverse now.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But there is a fascination I have, of course, with the background that hasn't been told, because the story's in my head. As I told Peter, every year I have an additional chapter to who Gus was before we ever met him in Breaking Bad.
You used the adjective likable earlier, and that's such an interesting adjective because Gustavo Fring is such a dangerous, terrifying man, yet he's the kind of guy where if I met him, it would be really important to me that he likes me. Like, I would want to impress him. Even your relationship with the manager that works and the rest. Yeah, I really like that relationship. And if I were your employee, I would want you to like me. What does it say about us as an audience and your character that even as bad as we know he is, I still like him? I light up every time he's on the screen.
I think it's his integrity and his morality. Certainly he doesn't do everything within the lines of legality, and certainly he can be vicious. But I think what you like about him is what I developed. And I decided that when I started to play this character, I wanted to talk to Vince about playing. I mean, he had all the clues in the 2 guest spots he wrote for me at the end of season 3 on Breaking Bad. 2 on Breaking Bad was hiding in plain sight. So that to me fascinated me. Someone in our world who has come from some other country, who's created a mega business, who's hiding in plain sight. And that, to me, was an important aspect of who this man is. He's taken advantage of the American dream. He's a very, very good businessman. But the scene with Lyle was so very important because there were a lot of other things going on in Gus's life at that point in time. And that actor was so wonderful in playing that role because he wanted to please. And Gus, really, and Gus took the moment out of irritation. He had a phone call that came in, irritated him, and he took that moment to teach and to instill confidence in the way you do things. And that was really an important scene because the way you do anything is the way you'll do everything. And so he was teaching him how to, in a way, apply this to his life just from looking at the fryer. And he asked him, Lyle is looking and looking, and he says, "Does it look clean to you?" Does it look clean to you?
I would have stayed there all night just scrubbing it over and over again. I get that. I almost equate it to like a Hannibal Lecter sort of thing where like, he's a bad person, but he's so smart and so like precise and so like classy, for lack of a better word, that you almost just feel like you would be nice to him knowing exactly, even though knowing everything that you know.
That's right. He's polite and he's a teacher and he's encouraging you to develop habits that are healthy. And who can go against that? Who can put that down? It's such a wonderful, small little lesson from a man who is has so many different sides to him.
Of course. Obviously when you started with Breaking Bad, you didn't necessarily know the direction that Gus was going to go. But when you start back in time with Better Call Saul, does it affect your performance or does it affect you in your head knowing the fate of this man now that you know what the end game is?
Well, I try to forget. The thing I laugh about on set with our other cast members is I say, well, I know what's going to happen to me, so I know I'll be around next season. I try to put it out of my head so that I'm able to go backwards, to feel moments where Gus is maybe slightly out of control, which wouldn't look like anything to the audience, but you would see it in Gus's eyes that he's sort of bubbling under the surface and a little bit out of control because he's a younger Gus who might be more hot-headed, who might he hasn't solidified his power or his self-control. So he's practicing. And so if I've done my job right, you'll see a younger, more spry, somewhat searching Gus in certain scenes to figure out how to bring this whole organization together.
My girlfriend actually and my parents just recently watched Breaking Bad for the first time during quarantine. And I told my girlfriend, I said, I'll tell you what, you're going to get to an episode called Face Off. And when you get there, I watched a lot of episodes with her, but I said specifically, don't watch that without me. I just want to watch it with you because I wanted to see her reaction. And I had my parents call me as well. So I'm just sort of curious. I think the death of Gus in Breaking Bad is one of the single greatest TV moments of all time. Particularly, I loved the tie. That's such a small detail. But I'm curious, what was that day filming like for you? And did you come up with that tie idea? Because that was such a perfect moment for him.
Well, after episode 401, where I had done something so reprehensible to Victor, witnessed by Walter and Jesse, of course, I realized after that people would be so very shocked after seeing that I probably wouldn't be in episode 402. And so at 403 came out, we started to shoot that, and Vince came out and he invited me to his office, and I went, oh, this is not a good sign. So within those moments, he was wanting to know how I felt about, the town's too big for both of you. One of you has to go, and how, Gus might go. It would be at the end of the season. And we discussed it back and forth. And I said, Vince, just look at what I do. I'm very proper. I stand up, and when I sit down, I unbutton my jacket. When I stand up, I button it up as Gus. I'm very meticulous. I'm always straightening my tie because as a man who wears formal clothing, a suit or a tie, you always want to make sure it's in the right place. And I stopped as I was doing this motion in Vince's office, and he went shy. Because he asked, would he walk into a hail of bullets? I said, Vince, he's already done that. And he's a made man that can't be taken out. We've already played that moment. Well, what would it be? What if there was an explosion? And if there was, well, what would he be doing? And so we both, I hit upon it and felt like it was such the perfect reverent move to take into the afterlife. So that's how that moment occurred.
Oh, I got chills. It's so great. I've been bragging to a lot of people for days now about getting the chance to talk to you. And I'm amazed at how many people fired back with like, oh my God, he's terrifying. And I'm like, well, okay, I get what you're saying. Like Gus is terrifying. But I was like, you and I have had the pleasure of meeting at junkets before. And I was like, he's actually a very good, nice guy. But I'm just sort of curious, when fans come up to you, because of how well you play this character, do you sense a little bit of apprehension? Do you sense a little bit of fear on their part just because of how well you play that part?
I do quite a bit, and it's an interesting thing to be in public and have people approach you, and they're at their natural pace to begin with, and then they slow and they see you and come take a step back because they don't know who I really am. And they just feel that Gus vibe, and they get a little frightened. I was on a plane and I got up to go to the bathroom, and there was a woman waiting in line to go to the bathroom, and she was petite and wayfish, and she turned over her shoulder and she saw me, and she literally turned red. She got pinned herself against the wall, and she just stared at me, and she said, and so the person before her came out of the bathroom, and she looked at me and she said, it's okay, Gus, you can go. And I said, are you okay? And she said, well, I don't know. And she literally was moving away from me. That's how convinced she was I was this guy.
That's amazing. That's a great story. I've just got to ask, and obviously I don't want to know as a fan of the show, but do you know what the ending of Better Call Saul is?
No, it's so funny you ask, because again, we've been doing a bunch of panels because the show is another on the 10 best list, or the #1 show of 2020. But and so Peter was asked last night. Bob asked Peter, Peter, you must know, but I surmise that maybe you don't. So I don't know if they know. They're such very facile and very they're wonderful writers, and so what happens for them is they wind up painting themselves into a corner and then having to figure out how to get out of it. And so they've talked about that, and it's led them to some really beautiful and wonderful moments in our show. I do think that most of it is all or hashed out already, but I do think there's some wiggle room, and I don't know what happens at the end. None of us do. They want us to be surprised and enthused when the script comes out the week before we shoot it, so we don't have any idea of what the actual ending will be right now.
I gotta be honest, I'm really nervous about Kim, man, because like she's not in Breaking Bad, so she either gets sent away into hiding or she dies, and I'm getting nervous, man. I'm getting nervous just thinking about it. My buddies and I, like, this is what my friends and I talk about. We have debates about, like what ends up happening to Kim, because we don't know. But I have a couple other things I want to talk about before I let you go. I just recently rewatched Do the Right Thing, which I think is one of the all-time great films in the history, in the plethora of cinema. I'm just sort of curious, your experience shooting that. At what point in the process did you sort of look around and go like, this is not just a normal movie, like this is something special?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we certainly, me and Spike and Martin Lawrence and Sam Jackson, it may have been 7 or 8 days into it that we felt we had something special. There was certainly a great titillating feeling when we were rehearsing, because who rehearses anymore? And I suggested to Spike that, hey, maybe we should rehearse a little bit. He said, yeah, we're going to read through a couple of days. And so the feeling grew from that day onward. Moving a whole block of people who live on the street interspersed with crack houses, and cleaning all that area up so we could have sort of a Hollywood set in Brooklyn was one feat within itself. And then there was a day, it had to be the 7th day of shooting, 7th day of shooting, where Sam Jackson and I looked at each other and we could feel it. And we said, we just said, hey, this is something different. This is different. And we knew, because of the incredible enthusiasm of Spike and all of the political elements of the film, to want to brawl the idea of peaceful protest, the idea that this is ours and you have to honor it because there are more of us. This is our neighborhood and we want to be a part of it. All of those ideas were so very special and important. By the time we finished the film, we all knew that this film was going to be a piece of art, and that it would either be a sleeper and people would really start to look at the world in a different way, or it would be a flop. Artistically wonderful, but maybe no one would see it. And so we were all very pleased that people did. I have to bow down to Spike, because, when I watched what was going on in Minnesota last week and the police station burning, and it took my breath away, because I had watched in the morning and I saw the police station with police on the roof, and it was daytime, and they were putting up some barricades and filming the protesters below. By 11 o'clock that night, that whole building was totally up in flames, and I could hear the chants. It was a news clip that I saw, and tears came to my eyes, because it shook me up, because no justice, no peace, the fire, the whole thing, burning down Sal's. I was right back and Do the Right Thing. I was right back there, and it made me sad, because 1989, we're in 2020, and so maybe a bit sad to realize that we really are still struggling with some of the same issues that we've struggled with for so long. One of my dearest friends, Steve Chisholm, is an anesthesiologist, and he wrote me as the movement was in its violent stage before it was sort of transformed itself to being more peaceful protest and inclusive of all human beings, black, white, yellow, indigenous, Asian, fighting New Zealand, fighting to have their voices heard. The indigenous people of New Zealand all have a common thread. And so for me, Do the Right Thing is being looked at again in European countries, also in America. Excuse me.
Bless you.
And thank you. And so I feel as if Spike made a very prophetic, very profound movie, and that he was really onto something and still is. And so I'm hoping and I believe that this time things will ultimately start to change for the better as people realize that we have to return to being human beings, as opposed to just drawing the line of the sand, the delineation between Black Lives Matter, White Lives Matter, all lives matter. And so that's the open door. And I think what's going to happen is that this movement will now encapsulate and encompass all people, and maybe even a name change will happen from that movement if they're progressive enough to allow all people to join our struggle. It would become a national and then a international movement, which it has.
I want to piggyback on something that you mentioned about just how relevant the film still is, because I'm watching it and I'm just thinking, like, you don't have to change a word of this movie. All you have to do is say it takes place in 2020, and I go, yeah, like, okay, like I buy it. It doesn't feel dated. But on the flip, like, and for any filmmaker to make a movie that's more than 30 years old that feels relevant is impressive. But I'm trying to think how to phrase this. I don't want that movie to feel relevant. I don't want it to feel like it could take place today. Is this one of the few movies where, like, it would be nice if it started feeling a little dated?
Yeah, you're very smart. Yeah, you want to deny the fact that all of these issues are still so prevalent and prominent in our society. And you not deny it, but you wish we were further along, is I think what you're saying. And I wish that too. I would have thought that would have happened just from this particular film, which was such a hit and brought Spike Lee to the forefront. And all of the things he was saying were so very pertinent, and they were resounding for African-American people. But yet we would hope that, I sit here, and again, I mentioned my friend Steve Chisholm, and I echo and feel what he texted me. My grandparents had to deal with this shit. I've had to deal with this shit. And now my children have to deal with this shit. And that hit me and struck me very deeply, because it's like generation after generation. And then I started thinking about my situation. I was born in Copenhagen, raised in Italy, Black father, Italian father, Black mother, and then came to America. And then I became a fearful person because of the color of my skin. And it doesn't let you out. I don't get a pass, even though that episode on the airplane, someone recognized me. I don't get a pass just because I'm Gus. I still live with the kind of fear and wondering if I'm going to make it home, and always doing the safety checks, doing the things that would keep the police from looking at me. So get in the car, make sure you have the seatbelt on, make sure the blinkers work, make sure you follow all the rules, because that's a fearful feeling that if you don't, you're going to be the one that gets in cuffs and is on the ground saying that I can't breathe. Now, that is not a normal way to live.
I'm going to shift gears and talk about a few more things before I cut you loose. If you can't tell, I am a bit of a nerd. I have movie memorabilia all around my place. And obviously I'm a fan of Star Wars, and I cannot wait to see where we ended up seeing Moff Gideon in the next season of Mandalorian. I'm not going to try to, because I know you can't tell me too much, but I'm sort of curious, even though we don't know a lot about him, do they sit down with you and explain, like, do you know his backstory? Do you know where it goes? Do you have to get that sort of information before you can start filming to be able to kind of fully flesh out a character like that?
I always like to have that. And I'm working with geniuses who know the whole Star Wars world. Jon Favreau is such a very dynamic and brilliant human being. And he has the visual capability of joining his brilliance with his visuals. Now he has a partner in David Filoni, who is from that Star Wars world. And they don't tell you everything. So there's a lot I have to figure out and go back and research, because again, they want to be able to be flexible and bring in something very exciting that you may never have thought of. So they don't want you to know exactly where you're from. But we did have long conversations, Favreau and I, in regard to how does Moff Gideon know everything? Where is he from? How does he know everything? How does he, now we know he has a dark saber. Oh my God. You know, so this guy is a special guy. And so we did talk a lot about the possibilities of his imperial nature and how the Moffs are, you know, wardens. But this is a special Moff, a special warden who may want to reunite the galaxy, the universe of our Star Wars world after the Empire has fallen. He is definitely a carryover from that Empire, but is he good or bad? Do we know yet? Does he really want to save humanity? So the questions are always wonderful to ask because they inform where my brain is while I'm working. And it's certainly been very exciting to work with these really wonderful artists. What I love about this particular piece is that it's steeped in mythology. And to me, that's the connection that George Lucas made in his support and love of Joe Campbell, who wrote a book called The Hero's Journey. And so this particular show is fantastic, and it's for the whole family because it strengthens our inner resolve to help open the door for us to understand that we're heroes too, that's human, to have that heroic feeling, to have that I want to be in service to others. That's why we're so social. We really want to interact. We really want to help our planet and help each other. And so I love that mythological feeling that our lives are bigger than we ever think they are. And because we're in the place that we call America, where lives seem to be expendable because we have cameras and news that show us people dying all the time, that should take some steam out of us for us to realize that we also glorify the part of our lives that we so want to live fully, but then we watch death and destruction, and we haven't yet smelled the roses to understand that we could all have what an incredible planet. This is the underneath all that. The Mando is the part of all of us that should stand up and take that baby Yoda's hand. The Mando is a part of all of us that wants to strengthen us to say, stand up, use your voice for good. And so for me, it reflects much of what we need in our world today. So it all starts with this violent tug. And you know, look, John Brown, a historical abolitionist who really helped African Americans before they were freed from slavery, said there will never be any justice without blood. So that bloodshed. So what I watched people get so excited and so violent because they are in pain. So, but if they could reach into that Mando bag that says, hey, you know, like everyone should walk out their door and say, yes, I'm a badass for love. I'm a badass for peace. I'm a badass for compassion. And it doesn't mean I have to be weak, but it means I have to use my intellectual prowess and my heart to change things, to allow people, to empower them. That's why people are angry. They haven't been empowered. We have no leader. No one stood up and empowered them to peace, empowered them to say, yeah, I'll go with you. Let's march. Let's change things. So now everything elevated. The violence has subsided except for groups who want to cause, you know, dissension and, you know, want an America that they envision. But for the most part, the world now has said no more. And this is a wonderful thing. So that's all derives from finding the strength to stand up. And this Star Wars piece is so fantastic because there's so many people standing up for different things that they want. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it evil? What is it? And I think we're going to find out in a very explosive and exciting way.
One more about Mandalorian. The show takes place at such an interesting point in the Star Wars timeline. At this point in the timeline, Luke Skywalker's still alive, Han Solo's still alive. We just learned Boba Fett's still alive. From just a fun standpoint, who in the Star Wars universe would you like to see Moff Gideon just cross paths with that we already made, you know, just maybe have a fun conversation with?
Oh my gosh, you know, I feel like it would be sort of incredible to be able to be in a world with Darth Vader somehow. You know, I have such a great respect for that character, and for James Earl Jones, who played him, because of that wisdom and depth of his intonation, and because of the feeling like he was someone who could protect all if it was all for good. So anything is possible in this universe, and and so part of me that feels like, okay, there is a little piece in my brain that says, why not think about or plant the seed that you are the incarnation or the next version or of Darth Vader, just without the mask.
I just got chills. That's awesome. That's so cool. And as we wrap up, this year is the 25th anniversary of The Usual Suspects. And, I've always sort of wondered, obviously that is widely considered one of the greatest surprise endings of all time. And you have a scene where you're talking to someone about, do you know who Kaiser Soze is? Do you know the story behind Kaiser Soze? But I'm sort of curious, when you filmed that scene, did you know who Kaiser Soze was? Like, how did you find out what the surprise ending to that movie was?
Well, we had such a great script, which the first read that I read, I was totally confused and didn't quite get it. Like, how could this be? And then read it again and thought it was quite brilliant. And so, yeah, I knew who I was chasing, which was great. And because back then they didn't black out the pages or any of that.
Yeah.
So I
that's
did
cool.
know who Kaiser Soze was. It was great to know that. It was just such an awkward and weird, independent, small budget film. That somewhere in there as well. I think it was at the Harold Examiner building downtown. I was shooting with Chaz Palminteri and with Kevin. And somewhere on that day, I think it was a third day of shooting, Chaz and I looked at each other and he said, Chaz, Chaz is so, definitively Italian, and I can be too when I'm around my own people. He said, this is good. I think it's going to be good. I think this is going to be good. And I went, yeah, I think it's going to be, we both kind of felt this was something different, innovative, great writer. Chris McQuarrie went on to become a director, and certainly Bryan Singer, great director. So, but I knew and was kind of stunned because of Kevin, the way Kevin played it. I mean, I would have never, ever realized that he could be that guy. Gosh, what a movie. So excited to be a part of that. And certainly, and a little fun factoid for you. The Usual Suspects, Do the Right Thing, both on the 100 best movies of all time list. So I'm winning it. What can I say?
You know what? I have a feeling that's not going to be your last time that you have a movie on that list, because you're already in two of the, multiple of the greatest series of all time. I am such a fan, and this is more than a pleasure. And I know you have 10,000 things going on right now. So the fact that you took the time to do this, I genuinely really do appreciate it. So seriously, sir,
truly a pleasure. And I hope we get a chance to speak again. Reach out and try to in the future, because you're just an excellent interviewer, and I feel like I'm just talking.
That's the greatest compliment I can hear. Seriously, sir, you're nothing but a class act, and I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. What a pleasure. See you.
Bye.